Hello and welcome to the Priori podcast for July 2016. I'm the editor, Kestell Duxbury. We've got a really exciting podcast this month. I had Jack Layton, who's a regular contributor and current PhD candidate at UCL in urban geography, and Harry Raithatha, who was in June's podcast. And we recorded it a couple of days after Britain voted to leave the European Union. So I had a couple of guests on. So we had two interviews at the beginning of the podcast. The first one was with somebody I studied with at the University of Sheffield, who had originally done French and Spanish at Cambridge and was doing Europeanisation for his masters. That was Andrew Todd, who's currently working out in Brussels at the minute. And then the second interview I had was an old friend and Labour colleague called Lewys Hall, who I met at Nottingham University, and again trying to gauge the views and opinions of people, sort of, and how Brexit has affected them and affected the Labour Party and the Tories and stuff like that. And then we moved on to some of the hate crimes that have come post-Brexit, and then move on to the awful shootings that happened in America, the hate crimes against the gay community out in Orlando. But it's a little bit shorter than the June podcast, and I must apologise now. We recorded it at the joint recording studios just off King's Cross in London. And whilst Jack and Harry had this very nice little bit of the recording studio, I was stuck in the corner where it was the only place I could get power to my laptop, so it wasn't the clearest of sound quality, I must concede. And we also had a few technical hitches, so it wasn't the smoothest podcast in the world, but you know, I mean, you'll get the general gist, and you can understand Jack and Harry, and they're actually the people's opinion that matter in this particular podcast. Both were really eloquent, and whilst I think we were all Remainers in the room, there was definitely an air of regret, and I think that has been shared among the country, particularly those who did vote to leave and have realised quite how badly they've been hit if they're going to Europe on a holiday, or anyone who has a private pension and their companies floated on the stock market. There was a lot of negativity post Brexit. That may well change in July. We just don't know. So I hope you enjoy July's podcast. As ever, you can comment on the Priori's editorial on thepriori.co.uk, and I will speak to you again after the show. Thanks. Hello and welcome to the Priori podcast for July 2016. I got the right year. I am Kestell Duxbury, and today we have Harry Raithatha, who's in the June podcast.
Hello.
And Jack Layton, who is a regular contributor to the Priori.
Good evening.
And well, it's going to be quite a single topic discussion today, because we are probably going to be discussing Brexit, because it is currently the 26th of June and the world has ended. As we know it, Britain has decided to leave the EU and the world is over. So that's going to be predominantly what we discuss. We're going to have a quick chat with Andrew Todd, who's contributed before, who's actually working in Brussels at the minute. And then after that we're going to have a discussion about what Brexit means to Britain and everything else around it. So for time being though, we'll have a quick chat to Andrew. So he is currently working in Brussels after coming from Northern Ireland, studying in the UK, so of course has some quite probably interesting views on Brussels. So Andrew, what is the mood in Brussels at the minute through not only to Brits working over there, but also for Europeans who work within the European Union?
Well, I would say the general mood in Brussels is one of shock. I think people didn't really see it coming. People were secretly thinking or hoping that Brexit would not happen and things would just carry on as normal. Um, but yeah, it hasn't worked out like that, and I think people are very disappointed. I think also the British people living and working here, because there are lots of British people working in the, for example, European Commission, also the British MEPs and all their staff as well, and they have lots of questions about what's going to happen. Because I mean, obviously, if the UK is no longer a member of the EU, it doesn't make sense that all the people working here in the EU institutions who are British, it sort of means that they have to go essentially. Um, so yeah, just lots of uncertainties, lots of questions, and yeah, really just people are very shocked about it.
Okay, and what do you think as British citizen who's Northern Irish working in Brussels for EU institutions? I mean, what do you think Brexit is going to mean to you personally?
Well, I would say for me, in practical terms, well, I do come from Northern Ireland, and I would identify myself as British. But being from Northern Ireland, I do have the privilege of being able to have Irish nationality as well. So, for example, I do have an Irish passport as well as a British one. So, in practical terms, this means that I still can enjoy all the benefits of being an EU citizen. But I know for lots of people, obviously, they don't have that option. Um, so I guess I'm lucky in that respect. And even you've seen media reports that how loads of people in Northern Ireland are like rushing to apply for Irish passports, and even all, people in lots of other parts of the UK are making that inquiry as well. I guess it's like a backdoor in a certain way. Um, but yeah, for Northern Ireland, actually, that's out of this whole Brexit issue. That's kind of the thing that's concerning me the most, because just moments after the results were announced, I mean, you had Scottish First Minister calling for another referendum. You had Martin McGuinness, who's the Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland, um, asking for a border poll, so effectively a referendum in United Ireland. And even just talking about those kind of issues, it's going to bring up a lot of things from the past. It's going to kind of raise a lot of tensions and anger, I think, even just discussing the prospect of having that kind of referendum in Northern Ireland. Because obviously, I would say even, of course, the unionist community, but I would say large sections of the nationalist community as well, are not really keen on the idea of United Ireland. So yeah, so these are all issues that are going to come to the fore now, especially if Scotland continue on their path. Because I mean, Scotland leaves the UK. What is it that England, Wales, Northern Ireland? But is that really going to work in practice?
And finally, Andrew, what would you say would be your predictions for the future for Britain and its relationship with the rest of Europe?
Yeah, I think that's a hard one, because I mean, no member state has ever left the EU before. At least not on this scale. The UK has always been a big one of the bigger players in the EU as such. So I think people are stepping into a lot of uncertainty. Um, and also, I think this will be seen as some kind of betrayal by a lot of European countries as well. So, I mean, I don't think it will be an easy ride for the UK in the future. Um, it will be very difficult in terms of negotiating how trade is going to work. What's going to happen to British citizens living in the EU countries, and what's going to happen to EU citizens living in the UK. So my prediction is lots of uncertainty and lots of difficult negotiations ahead.
Okay, so we've just heard from Andrew, who's in Brussels at the minute. I mean, Jack, what do you make of what's happened?
I mean, firstly, I'm going to apologise for any groan, sighs, cries of despair, because that's essentially been all I've been able to articulate over the last 48 hours. I think he pulled it out nicely, actually. Shock. I think shock from the establishment about what's happened. I don't think anyone in any kind of influence saw what was going to happen. Harry?
I think pretty much the same. The sort of results as they were coming in didn't seem to suggest that Brexit would win, and just total utter shock. My family do work in local government, and none of them saw it coming. And what's happening in terms of legislation now, and where we move from this, is just beyond everyone, to be honest.
I mean, is anything going to happen? Is government still going to?
It will still function. I don't think we've descended into sort of J.G. Ballard style chaos, but it's strange given that majority of our law has some input from Europe. Where do we move from that?
I mean, in terms of what Andrew was on about being a Brit in Brussels.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Jack, you're about to start your PhD at UCL. London voted with a big majority staying, probably not as big as we expected. We probably expected it to be a tad bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you've been chatting to international students or students from the EU. What's there? Do they feel that somehow they've been targeted, that they've been, I don't know, sort of turned against?
Yeah, it's been a really funny mood over the last few days in London. So I live just north of where we're recording this in Kentish Town, and on the day of the vote it kind of felt like a victory lap for Remain. There were 3 different people on the high street handing out stickers and posters for Remain. Everyone had a slight spring in their step. That's what it really felt like. And then since then I've personally felt very down, but then so has everyone else around me. I'm currently living with 2 Germans, someone from Greece, and Irish woman, and the tone of the flat has shifted. And I went to a physiotherapy session on Saturday. The woman was Polish, been living and working in the UK for 10 years now. Met her husband here, bringing a daughter up here, and she didn't register for British citizenship at the time because she didn't feel she needed to. She never thought this kind of issue would arose. So she is now didn't have a vote, and the message was very clear to her. She felt it was targeted at her, and that the prejudice is only going to get more exacerbated from here.
Again, you're...
the same sort of scenario, especially with law, given that there's so many foreign students on my particular course, and the degree they're doing will only let them practice it in England and Wales. Obviously there's a fear that they'll be subjected to the £35,000 cap on earnings.
It's not cap, it's a minimum.
Well, it's a minimum threshold. So, the fear is that there are only certain jobs out there that will pay that much, and there's thousands of students that are going to be hit by it. So,
Yeah, I felt guilty wandering around the city, actually, that Britain has decided to send this kind of message to other citizens. It's obscene, to be honest. It really is. And if you look at some of the stuff that's come out in the last couple of days of the sharp increase in hate crimes and verbal attacks on people, it's shocking that this is what the country's come to.
Last month we were chatting to Ben Walters, who was a Leaver. He was still a European, but he's a Leaver from this EU or this Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand why people don't want to be in the EU?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a Eurosceptic at heart, to be honest. I've written endless essays on the faults and flaws of the European Union as it currently stands, and I had some really civil engagements on Facebook with some people I knew from uni that are voting to leave, and they have very well thought out, reasoned arguments. But for this referendum, you could not vote leave in good consciousness, because the message was that this was going to support far-right parties that wanted to hit down on immigrants. There was no other way that the nuance of the reasons that people voted for Brexit get lost in a single issue referendum.
Would you go with that? Would you? Can you understand? I mean,
I can understand why people voted out. I can see the arguments that Ben made last time about how the common agricultural policy takes up a huge amount of the EU's budget, and how people are obviously wound up about the free movement of labour and how it's undercut wages in the UK. You can understand frustrations, but I think, just as Jack said, you in this referendum would have to look at the wider picture. You'd have to understand the impact that it would have on the economy and what Britain's place is in the world. I mean, you can't honestly think that Britain is as big a power as it was 100 years ago. We can't broker the same kind of deals with other countries as we could back then. And, it's basic hegemony. You trade with a larger group. You need to be part of a bigger group to be recognised in the world.
I mean, coming from what Andrew was saying is of the mood in Brussels and also where Britain's going to go next. I mean, Harry, what do you see is going to happen in the next 5 years? As Andrew quite clearly said, it is uncertain. No other country has left the EU. It's hard to see what changes are going to be implemented straight away, particularly regarding free movement of workers, what's going to happen to people based here. The cost of running immigration tribunals for the people that are here is just completely ridiculous. There's millions of EU citizens that are here who are uncertain about their futures, and yet the cost of deporting them, which I doubt will happen, alone is just... The fact is, no one saw this coming, and trying to move forward from it is beyond most people at the moment. Would you go with that, Jack?
Yeah, I just want to pick up on that last point that nobody saw it coming, and it was mentioned in the interview the kind of shock that the members of the European Parliament had at the result. And I think it's a really important point, because clearly for 52% of the population it wasn't a shock. This was what was going to happen, and I think it speaks volumes to the gulf that exists between the everyday working life of people and some of these politicians and bureaucrats, and, to be honest, the elite in our own political system.
Were we too comfortable? I mean, do you think that maybe when Farage talks about the political class, the merchant banks, things like that, were they just too comfortable? Were they too confident, too arrogant in Britain's position within Europe? Did they think this is too good to let go, or do you think they were genuinely worried? I mean, the pound, the day before, rose to its highest level in 2016. So obviously they must have some form of confidence in the market to be able to raise it to 150 for the dollar. Then day after, it completely... I mean, what was it? Barclays took a hit of 35% on their share price. So obviously it was a big shock. Is it arrogance? Is it too strong a word?
I think it's two things. I think on behalf of the establishment, it was complacency that the vote was going to go in it as expected, and then for the people campaigning for leave, so your Farages, your Goves and your Johnsons, they treated it as a Bullingdon Club union debate. They adopted positions, they performed their arguments, and it didn't matter whether it was fact or fiction, it was just the performance that counts. That's what scored points. And for them, this has no consequences.
I mean, in terms of what you said, I mean, when you talk about the right wing, I mean, those on the right who wanted to leave, I mean, I think that's been most people's view of what Brexit is. But what about Lexit? Because there were people on the left who wanted to leave, and when people were bringing up the examples of the neoliberal nature in terms of what was forced upon the Greeks and the Spanish, people do look at the European Union as being this neoliberal capitalist institution. Did the arguments on the left? Do you think that they were? I mean, I don't think there were voices much. I mean,
no.
I mean, George Galloway got lost within the grassroots thing because I haven't seen anything of him.
No.
But Farage comes out at 6 a.m. in Westminster immediately. I mean, do you think that maybe that might have swung it, or was it really the immigration? That form of the...
I can sympathise with the Lexit argument, but as I said previously, in this referendum there is no excuses. they knew what they were voting for. And I was sympathetic to the Lexit cause, but when you look at who else was campaigning to remain, it wasn't just the establishment. It was people like Noam Chomsky. Like, he very clearly said that in all good consciousness he wouldn't vote to leave. And when you've got the most famous anarchist academic saying that, you should probably stay in the European Union, that kind of like cuts short any Lexit argument. What was the second part of that question? I got lost there.
Do you think that actually won hearts and minds? Do you
No,
genuinely
again,
think
I think this is the Twitter bubble. Like, everyone tweets those messages to themselves, and I would be very surprised if that was more than 100,000 people tops.
Well, would you go with that, Harry? Would you say that Lexit actually has been...
I don't think it did have significance. I don't think it ever picked up in the way that people thought it would. I mean, given the arguments against TTIP and the fears that are there, and the argument the EU operates broadly with a fairly corporate agenda that actually undermines workers' rights and pay, and I think that did get lost. I think that the fear was that if we did leave the EU, TTIP would be imposed in some shape or form. We would need to broker a deal with the US anyway, and arguably it would come in the form of TTIP. We wouldn't have a bargaining chip.
Well, you said in the last podcast that actually TTIP was going to come quicker leaving.
Yeah.
It doesn't slow it up, it just accelerates it.
And the worry that the people campaigning for leave were individuals like Priti Patel, whose view on workers' rights is pretty non-existent, to be honest. I mean, arguably, it would have come. Will come quicker with the impending changes that are coming in. I think immigration was the swaying debate in this matter. Having spoken to people who did vote for Brexit up north, I think the immigration debate was so significant that that's what drove them out.
Well, I mean, next we're going to have a chat to a disgruntled Labour supporter who went to university with. He's called Lewys Hall, and get his view on a couple of issues. So, Lewis.
Right, okay. At this point I have a confession. I'm currently recording these questions I'm asking Lewis in my living room because we were having some issues with Skype and trying to get everything working properly. So this is actually just before the podcast goes out. But what we'll do is we'll just pretend that there was absolutely no gap in recording and that you never heard me say this at all. So the first question is, what does Brexit mean for Labour, and therefore what does it mean for their leader Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, I think for the Labour Party, the PLP, it's pretty disastrous, considering most of them are pro-EU, that they're the pro-EU project. Corbyn, as I say, last year was elected with a pretty thumping mandate, and I think sort of the Blairites and the moderates in the party pretty much said to him, knowing his past Eurosceptic beliefs, they said to him, if you don't do this, there'll be trouble for you straight away. So he was pretty much forced into supporting Remain, and we all know he's a Eurosceptic. So this is why there's a move against him now. I can totally understand that, although I really don't blame him for getting the Labour vote out. The Labour vote was, the old Labour working class was really kicked in the balls under Blair as well. So the working class has been moving away from Labour since Blair. So it's not his fault at all. I don't think any of the other candidates like Kendall, Burnham or Yvette Cooper, I mean, they were so uncharismatic they couldn't even beat Corbyn. So I don't think they would have been able to do it either. So I think probably, I don't know, it's a difficult one. I think for the country it's bad, but for the Labour Party, I think if Corbyn was allowed to espouse his anti-EU views, I think the Labour Party would actually be ahead in the polls, because that Corbyn's closer to the Labour working class vote on Europe than the Blairites and the moderates are. So yeah, it's a bit of a mess, but they were looking for any excuse to have a go at him anyway. So we'll see the Labour Party probably descend into civil war.
And what does this mean for the Conservatives, sort of post-Cameron? No, that sounded shite. What does this mean? What does this mean for the Conservatives post-Cameron?
I'm kind of surprised. Looking at the polls, actually, towards the end, it did look as if the last like 4 or 5 polls from different agencies actually had Leave ahead by a bit. So actually, unlike the general election, the polls got it right. So I'm actually kind of surprised that David Cameron thought Remain would win. I'm really puzzled. I don't think he realised it would win. And on the night of the Brexit vote, there was that letter signed by 84 Tories urging Cameron to stay on. And then you kind of knew that really the crap was going to hit the fan. So he had to go. His position was untenable. I can understand that. So basically, the mad right wingers, the sort of the non-Tory, the non-Blairite Tories, are poised to grab the throne, and that was on the cards. I mean, Boris's blonde ambition has made it, and so we're going to have quite a right-wing Tory government. Boris has said we need to put charges on the NHS. We all know Gove is absolutely insane. There's Liam Fox, who's an uber Thatcherite in the background as well. So, the Tory party is going to be handed over to those guys. And so I don't really think that's good for the working class who voted Brexit, as you'll have sort of untrammeled free market forces absolutely decimating their communities again, I think. So, damn.
Who do you think will be the next Conservative leader?
Oh, Boris, without a doubt. He's far ahead amongst the Tory electorate, which I think is members and MPs, I think. Yeah, they did expand it to... It used to be just MPs, the Tories, but now it's members. So, yeah, he's far ahead. So unless he screws up in the leadership contest and says something really ridiculous, I think it will be Boris, I think. I can't see anyone else.
And what does it mean for the Union? As in, what does it mean for Great Britain, particularly as the Northern Irish and the Scots didn't vote to leave?
I think it's game over, really, isn't it? The Scots are obviously absolutely incensed that England, on the whole, voted for Brexit. They seem to be a bit more internationalist, and historically that's always been true. I mean, Scotland, sort of, historically, Scotland, Scottish kings and queens united with France against England, so it's perhaps a more sort of internationalist outlook. Ireland as well, that's problematic because we have Sinn Féin saying we should have a vote for United Ireland, so that could mean a reversion back to the Troubles of the past. So it's a pretty scary outlook, really, and probably, what is it? I mean, UK, the United Kingdom is Northern Ireland, Wales, England and Scotland, isn't it? I mean, that's game over. Great Britain's sort of the whole thing, including Ayr. So I think United Kingdom, it's game over, really. I think, although I don't know, actually, apparently the Scots are suffering from referendum election fatigue. They've had 4 elections in 2 years. So apparently, well, he's a Blairite, so what does he know? Apparently the Scots won't vote for independence, but a new poll says independence is on 59%. So it looks as if it's going that way. So I think we'll have England and Wales as a much reduced Great Britain.
Right. So I mean, we've just heard from Lewis there. I mean, we'll pick up on the first point. I mean, let's talk about what this means for Labour. I mean, Harry, you're a Labour member who
I'm currently a Labour member. Maybe not when this podcast goes out, but we'll see. I
mean, do you think it's right? I mean, today we've had the ninth
resignation. No, 10th. Charlie Faulkner, I believe, was the number 10. I think the Labour Party has had this coming for quite a while. I think there has been a feeling against Corbyn pretty much since he was elected. The PLP doesn't support him, and at some point there was going to be some form of a coup. To be honest, I think this is probably the best time to have it while the Tories are in complete meltdown. But
surely, though, if you're going to have a coup, if your ultimate position of strength must be when the enemy's at its weakest, and the Tories are going to be in complete disarray for months.
Yeah.
Why then would you then go? Well, we might as well join them. I mean, if they're going to, would you not say that actually now's the time to really get behind Jeremy? Because actually, if we're to believe that the next election isn't going to be until 2020, surely it gives Labour the opportunity to say, Let's really get behind us, really attack them, show them up for what they are, show the Brexit campaign up for what it really was, and then let's get if it requires a Blairite or someone like that. Yeah. I know that's definitely not what Lewis wants.
Arguably, all of this has been triggered by the sacking of Hilary Benn. So I don't know if I'm convinced that this has all happened because it was planned to happen the day after Cameron resigned. I think that Hilary Benn being sacked as one of the most prominent, I would say, big tent members of the Labour Party has sparked off a domino effect, and people who weren't Corbyn supporters within the party, within the cabinet, have chosen this moment to go, right, we need to have this debate. I don't know what you think.
Well, Jack, you're not a Labour member.
No, not currently. Labour supporter. I've donated in the past.
Okay.
But first of all, why are we having this discussion? How on earth is Labour capitulating on this weekend? This weekend where the internal Tory civil war took us out of the European Union, and all the news today has been about
Labour tearing itself apart.
And it is ridiculous. David Cameron was forced to resign yesterday. Have we forgotten about that already? And yet here we are, first question, right, what do we think about Labour? It is ridiculous and, to be honest, irresponsible of the parliamentary party. It
is true, it hasn't been the best time to have this debate. Admittedly, every time the Tories have been in turmoil in the last 2 years, Labour seem to do something that's bugging their scenario more. The fact that the whole Piggate scenario was overshadowed by God knows what, and the Mossack Fonseca scandal didn't get the coverage that it deserved was just a testament to how much contempt the media and pretty much everyone has at the moment for the party.
I think in terms of the Piggate scandal, I think the fact that we refer to it as Piggate, not Lord Ashcroft trying to buy himself a cabinet post, that's the issue there. But
not Bullingdon Club running our country gate.
That's. But anyway, I understand your point about Labour deciding to shaft itself with its own
lovely term.
Yeah, but let's. Jack, before we talk to you, I won't talk about Labour anymore because it is. But for what it means for the Tories, it's not only for the Tories; it's for potentially the government in 2020, and it's also it's Britain alone. This is the thing. This is not just generational.
Yeah.
This is something that could actually make or break Britain's relationship with the rest of the world for decades.
Completely.
As Lewis said, he thinks it's Boris Johnson. He thinks he's going to be the person in. He's going to be Prime Minister. Would you agree?
I think it's difficult to argue with that. They have just had 52% of the general public support them. That is by far the biggest mandate that any coalition of politicians has ever received in their entire life. And to be honest, I think it will be Johnson. And I'll go out there and say that I reckon Farage is well within his right to demand a place on the next cabinet for a peerage. I would not be surprised if that happened.
He would need to be an MP.
Gets given a peerage, sits in the House of Lords.
Right, and then he's on the cabinet.
Yeah, a member of the cabinet. So he'll be one of the most powerful politicians in the entire country without ever having been voted a member of Parliament.
Quite ironic given his reasons for Brexit, but I'm going to take a slightly controversial view and say it's going to be Theresa May. I'm not convinced that the Tory party is fully behind Boris. I know that he is liked by members of the public. I don't know what his appeal is outside of the South.
I was at a 60th birthday party last night in Bedfordshire. So we're in Tory heartground, and really we were discussing about who is going to be next and what we think of Boris Johnson. And this lady, I know, she's probably one of the more active members of the Tory party in that part of the world. And she said she would vote if David Miliband was an option over Boris Johnson. she would vote for David Miliband. And I mean, I think that goes. I think whilst he might be very popular within certain rounds and on Have I Got News for You and stuff like that, actually, as a politician, he's been quite shrewd. I think he plays the game, but I think actually now is not the time for him to get on a zip wire. I think now he's actually got to play statesman, and that's a very different Boris Johnson from what we've known in the past.
I mean, that's the thing. He's not a statesman. He's a journalist. He knows how to spin a story, lie about a story to get good coverage.
Right.
To be perfectly honest, and that's an interesting take on it. But I think it speaks volumes again that we aren't learning the lessons of this referendum, and that you can't parachute drop a establishment candidate and the public will go along with that. They've clearly expressed that they do not want being told what to do by anybody, any elites, any establishments. For those listening, I am doing air quotes. So the idea that a nice centrist candidate will come in and sweep up the next election is...
But there's plenty of centrists in the Tories. I think the other thing to also remember is not every Tory aligns themselves. Not every Tory is a Brexiter.
But they may not be a Brexiter, but they're far more savvy, shall we say, than the Labour Party has proved itself to be. And they'll know when to jump on a winning horse.
Yeah.
It's such an anecdote. I mean, would you go? I mean, what's your opinion, Harry?
I mean, to be honest, I'm unsure.
You say Theresa May.
I say Theresa May because I think the Tories want to pick someone who's a bit more of a diplomat than Boris Johnson.
As they described about Philip Hammond, safe pair of hands.
Exactly. You want someone. If you want someone who's going to take us out of Europe and get us a better deal, do you want Boris being the face of that?
Well, we know it's not going to be Gove. Gove has put himself forward and said he will back Boris Johnson. Liam Fox has been continually sort of edging his way in.
Yeah.
Theresa May was a reluctant Remainer. As I think so was Philip Hammond. Stephen Crabb would be another name to throw. But hypothetically, if we were going to draw up this leadership race, who else would you go for? Who else would you think would be in the mix? Ian Duncan Smith.
God.
There will. I think, like every leadership contest, there will be the wild card, the dynamic candidate.
Jeremy Corbyn, I think would be.
The Brexit.
I mean, we all, hope that those people never see the lights of power. But God, if Jacob Rees-Mogg or someone like that chose to stand, it's so unlikely. But then again, it's all to play for.
Or would they be bold enough to maybe take on Farage?
Ooh, that is an interesting prospect.
Because he's been there before. He left because the Tories were too much within Europe, and now they've led.
Or if we're playing the hypothetical, a merger between the parties.
What?
And have
Tory and Labour.
Yeah. No.
UKIP and Tory.
Certain strands of Labour maybe, but
yeah. Maybe Hillary could be persuaded.
I think it's an interesting point. If you look back over my voting history, I voted in 2 referendums in the general election. The first on the alternative vote, which is about voting reform, and the second that we've just had. I honestly think if that first referendum had passed, we wouldn't be in this position now. We'd have a more proportional voting system, and I think the country needs it. I think Labour needs to split in 2, the Tories need to split in 2.
Yeah.
And we need to seriously and deeply reform how our government operates at a very functional level in Westminster, in the House of Commons, with the House of Lords.
If we're talking about split, and now the last question I asked Lewis, what does this mean for the union? The SNP have clearly come out, they've already lost 1 independence vote. Mm-hmm. But Scotland wanted to stay in. Mm-hmm. That was almost 2/3 of Scotland wanted to stay in.
Yeah.
Higher than the capital.
Yeah.
That's how much they want to stay in. What's next? What's next for Scotland? What's next? Probably for Northern Ireland, because they were the 2 who wanted to stay in. Wales did vote to leave. England voted to leave. What is next for the union?
I think they'll I think the union as a whole will move in the same general direction, but I think there'll be clauses in the gradual process of leaving the EU. I could see a situation where both London and Scotland get kind of Devo Max scenarios where they retain certain trade deals with the EU. I don't think that's unforeseeable.
Yeah.
So maybe not complete breakup, but certainly more so than it is now.
I mean, I think there would be increased calls for Scottish independence. I think that, since the referendum, support for independence has been on the rise. And if anything, this has just added to that. The fact that Scotland is a more liberal country than England and Wales, the fact that it's voted to stay in rather than out. I mean, it is. I think there are grounds for it to leave. I think there are grounds for it to call another referendum on the matter, and I don't think it's unforeseeable that we could see them leave within the next 5 years.
I mean, in my opinion, I think Scotland is now gone. I think you can almost see that as inevitable. I think and Andrew alluded to this earlier, is this going to be a resurgence of the Troubles? In Ireland, I mean, I don't think whilst there is still movements to stay in Britain, stay in the EU and become part of Ireland, there are still these deep-rooted religious cores that families have. I mean, I did my master's thesis on basically a electoral theory, and I didn't include Northern Ireland because you're not only dealing with which way they vote, they're also voted in via PR. They also don't just vote left to right. It's left to right and
religious lines.
So I mean, we're now dealing with a situation where not only you've got those who want to be part of the UK and part of Ireland, you've now got those somewhere in the middle who now want to be part of Europe. I mean, who arguably might join the Irish side but still have Protestant ties. I mean, what's going to happen? Are we going to see a resurgence of the violence? Do we need Clinton back?
I mean, as simplistic a question as that is, I think it all does depend on what deal's brought back. I think it's too uncertain at this point to call.
Uncertain, certainly, but definitely a really good question, and a question that wasn't raised in the run-up to the referendum. We didn't get this kind of detail, we didn't get these kind of very serious consequences. It was the worst kind of public discussion of politics I've experienced, and it was awful. You only need to look back at the last 48 hours and some of the pledges that have already been drawn back on. 350 million. Well, that was more of a hope, really. Immigration. Well, if we want to trade, it's.
The big thing that I think has come up, and the reason I asked the question about Northern Ireland is because the discussion is going to be we're going to have one physical border, as in one sort of same landmass, but a physical border across that, and that's a Northern Irish border. That has to be. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to the Northern Irish border. You just drive. You just drive straight through, and there's no issues. I mean, Andrew did speak about earlier, he's got Irish citizenship as well, so they've got their own deals. But there is going to have to be a physical border, because if there is no free movement, and you do have, let's, for argument's sake, low-skilled Eastern European workers fly into Dublin and then get a bus across, which you could at the minute, being well, you still can at the minute while we're still technically a member of the European Union, but that's a possibility. What then happens if, which I assume Ireland are going to stay? I can't see. I don't see why it would be a domino effect that Ireland would leave, because they've actually done quite well at the European Union, despite some troubles earlier on. But what is going to happen to that? I mean, and I think the real big question for what's going to happen in Brussels is also who takes responsibility of the situation, not only what's going to happen in the Northern Irish border, but what's going to happen in Calais, because that is going to spiral out of control. We're going to have people trying to get over before we officially leave. Is there going to be a huge influx of expats trying to come back?
Again-
did we need to vote a manifesto? Did we need the Leave and the Remains? David Cameron was in a situation where he goes, I've brought back this deal. We have this deal. This is now what's going to happen in the future. And then did we need Boris Johnson, the official Leave campaign, to go, this is our manifesto, this is what you're voting for?
Yes.
And is that what's failed?
Yes, we did need that.
Okay.
But if we did have that, I'm not convinced that public discussion would have gone any differently.
It would have focused on the same points of immigration.
It would have evolved into more issues. But I think we definitely did need that. I mean, there's the footage of the Sky News reporter this morning who was talking to one of the Brexit camp, asking if they've got a plan, and apparently he responded, no, you should ask number 10, they'll have the plan. And it is just complete thin level of engagement with what this actually meant for millions of people across the country and across the continent. And it was all in the performance, all in the bluster of being able to take back control.
I hated that tagline.
I mean, take back control from whom? Like, really?
We went past, me and my girlfriend drove past the care home my grandmother was staying in before she died. And considering that she came to this country from Spain in 1958, worked in the NHS, paid £900 a week to a care home, that then had a vote, leave, take back control, I think, actually, your issue is not with people.
I think this is a really important point, because the way the European Union was made out in the referendum was that it was a totalitarian dictatorship, and everywhere across the European Union was exactly the same, which vastly overestimated the power that the European Union actually has. Like, the UK is not Germany, the Germany is not France, France is not Greece, Greece is not Spain. All of these places have their own governing institutions, their own financial policies, their own welfare provision, their own migration. Like, it was just, I didn't recognise the European Union that was being presented to the public to be voted on.
Would you go with that, Harry?
I think that it was made out to be overbearing and having control on significant aspects of our life. It does have some control over big issues, but I'm
not as much as
as you said, Parliament still have the ability to pass their own legislation, and yes, you need cooperation on bigger issues. You need common policy on medicines, for instance, because they should be regulated across Europe. And arguably, now that we have left, we're still going to need to comply with that, because we're going to want to trade with Europe.
You can't sell substandard cancer drugs or anything
like
that.
You have to have cross-border participation, and it's not going to make a shadow of difference, because now we're going to have to comply with regulations that we have no power in influencing.
Just a very, very quick point, just to join.
I was just going to say, 3 or 4 years ago, it wouldn't have been unforeseeable for David Cameron to campaign on a "we want to be more like Germany" kind of pitch. Like, they're well regarded as the best economy in the European Union, high rate of manufacturing, high wages, like good welfare provision. But that overbearing European Union.
But I mean, you say that there are still essences of the far right coming through, not only just Germany,
France with Le Pen.
France, big issue. I mean, there are big rises. UK. I mean, on that topic, it's two things. I mean, the rise of hate crime has gone up. I mean, how many things have you seen today that people voted out to get rid of the Muslims?
Yeah.
You're just like going, okay, two things. Number one, you're a moron, and number two, Islam is not a nation state within the European Union. I mean,
it's a good point, because you have the Parliamentary Labour Party now thinking that the lesson from this referendum is to be tough on immigration. Whereas, to be honest, no, we need to inform, educate, and say that no, migration's a good thing, and frame it in a way that resonates, because the statistics about migration being a net benefit to the UK has been well known for a long time now. So until we find a way of framing that in a way that appeals to your Brexit voters, there's going to be a real challenge for anyone campaigning to govern this country.
I mean, I think there is a trouble. The normal people understand what immigration policy is. Do they understand who's allowed in, who's allowed out? arguably not. I mean,
this argument has been a lot about immigration, but if
Yeah.
you also want to talk about hate crime, then I think we do have to mention that what can only be described as the murder of Joe Cox.
Yeah.
How important do you think that was? Not only for the EU referendum, which admittedly it's going to have a bearing, it happened the week before, but what do you think it has done to British politics?
I mean, it has exposed the nasty side of British politics that still exists, and the fact that far-right groups with fairly violent agendas are still out there. I don't really have much to say on the issue. It is just complete shock.
It was. I think the best piece I read on it was on the day of the attack, and it was the piece in the New Statesman, which made the very careful argument of saying that when we have political discourse such as we're having, it increases the likelihood of events like this happening. And it was deeply shocking, and to put it in a slightly longer perspective, I don't think it's had enough of an effect. It was.
But the timing of that was.
It was a quiet weekend, and people were respectful. But come Monday, Tuesday, campaign was back in full swing, and discourse since then has been just as toxic.
I mean, if we voted to remain, and the status quo was maintained, as I think most people thought it was going to. I mean, I've spoken to leaders who said I wouldn't have lost any sleep if we remained, because that's what I expected. And I think people did almost vote with an anticipation that we were going to. If we did remain, do we think we would have maybe? Well, I mean, I personally have an opinion on this, but I mean, what do you think? We all of a sudden would have focused on our own democracy and MPs, and more so but because we've left, it's all been overshadowed.
That's a good question. I'm not sure if there would have been much change, to be honest. I'm very pessimistic, because this isn't just the state of current political discourse isn't just the fault of the referendum. It's the build-up of 20, 30 years of base political discussion in the tabloids, on the news, by politicians, and that doesn't go away overnight, no matter how horrific the events were and how tragic the events were. You can't go back on that, unfortunately. And you're seeing the same thing in America at the moment, where the Republican Party are reaping what they've sowed with their anti-government, anti-migrant discourse, and all of a sudden Trump is playing up to that and doing incredibly well, because he's saying what the voters are worried about. And they're only worried about those things because they've been told to worry about those things over decades.
Yeah.
In the same way as the Brexit referendum, it is just the rise of populist politics. Arguably, the referendum was won because of the animosity that the tabloids have had towards the EU, and how that's brewed for the last 30 years, with the Sun having the headline of was it Up Yours, Dolores, I believe.
Funny enough, my aunt wrote that. My aunt wrote that piece. Really, not the family's finest one, but no, she wrote that. At the time, she shared my surname. So yeah, if you ever Google it, you see.
So this is why the Priories come into existence.
The funniest thing is that I was chatting to a book reviewer party a while ago, and she then had followed the Priory and then tweeted me my own personal account and said, "You're no relation to Liz Duxbury." And I went, "Well, yeah, she's now Liz Phillip, but yeah." And it's like, "Why is that?" She said, "Oh, because I wrote for her when she was at what was it? It wasn't the Daily Star, it was, but it was one of these sort of tabloids she went to afterwards." Right. But yeah, I mean, you do get that sort of thing.
And you, sorry.
Yeah, what was your take on it then? What did you want to say? What do you think would have happened?
I think the status quo, we wouldn't have got over the weekend and still have been banging on about leaving, because I don't think the questions would have been asked. I think maybe the question would have been, well, what changes now? And you wouldn't have any resignations. You probably would have had a bit more support for Jeremy Corbyn in the PLP, because he's led this. I mean, and David Cameron would have left.
No.
Boris Johnson and Mike Gove probably would have failed. You might have had a couple of resignations from the cabinet from prospective leavers, but then all of a sudden you then look at, oh, hang on a minute, why has this happened? And you probably would have had a bit more of a take of what's happened, because the status quo was resumed. I mean, I'm not saying that all of a sudden when they're going to turn, by the Monday, we're going to be turning back towards Joe Cox's family and going, this was horrific, what do we do? But I mean, Carla, the rapper, makes some excellent points and go, people don't want the answer of going, this is a systemic problem. People don't want to be told that, because it's not a quick fix.
No.
And this was somebody, whether you want to say he was a far right terrorist, mentally ill, a freedom fighter, whichever way you want to gloss it. This is not just one cause. This is but I mean, just moving on. I mean, what's happened across the pond in Orlando? In the shootings there. Again, this was not, and I'm glad the tabloids haven't been able to focus on this as much as they would have done and have done in the past. This was not a Muslim terrorist. This was somebody who had deep-rooted psychological issues with his sexuality, and probably had been radicalised because of that, probably had mental instabilities as well. But again, this is not just going, this person is a Muslim, therefore I mean, it doesn't work. I mean, I think any rational person would go with that. But I mean, what would be your sort of take on? Can you compare the two?
There are parallels to be drawn of toxic discourse increasing the likelihood of pushing unstable individuals over the edge, and the main difference is the access to the weaponry. And America has never felt like such a foreign country, other than when it talks about its gun laws. It's one of those things that makes the place seem incredibly alien to me. And even liberal commentators in the American media, they'd never consider saying that, no, we're going to ban all guns. It's like, oh yeah, I'm a gun advocate. I like guns. Like, we just need to like increase regulation a little bit. Whereas like coming at it from here, it's like, no, take their guns away. They are dangerous weapons, and people shouldn't have access to them. Full stop.
I mean, there are two strands to this debate, and obviously there's the public safety issue and the fact that every other Western power that's had a gun massacre, Dunblane in the UK, the Port Arthur massacre in Australia, the reaction has been to remove access to firearms, and undoubtedly it's led to less mass shootings. The only one I can think of since Dunblane is Raoul Moat in the UK.
Mass?
Well, mass is more than 3.
And that was 3.
That was
That's the lawyer talking.
No. I think. So I don't share that point of view with you, Jack. I mean, I think if you want to look at the situation in Canada, you probably have more cultural similarities with the Canadians and the Americans. They have more guns, yet don't have this issue. And this is, I think, again, this is maybe another. The thing that Canadians do have is regulation. And I think if anybody wants to go and hurt someone, you can do it. I mean, I don't think anybody. If you're deranged enough to be in that situation where you really want to go and kill someone, it's possible. And I think that is going to happen in Canada.
Yeah.
The problem with America. One of the problems.
This is it.
This is
listen
it.
in,
Donald
folks.
Trump, listen up.
The problem.
Yeah. The big issue is that guns are seen to be that the moment you even start regulating, that is it. You've lost the right to own guns. And Barack Obama, I can't remember where it was, and it was a bit of a cut clip, which was a shame. So I would have liked to have heard the the response from the person who initially asked the question, but basically the question was, well, the moment you have some regulation, when does it stop? And Barack Obama said, well, when we had issues with automobile fatalities, what did we do? Well, we didn't ban cars, because that's a ludicrous way, and also people get angry.
But cars aren't designed to kill people, Kez.
Depends on where you buy
Well,
it, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, his general point is we increase safety regulation and we make them a little bit safer. We write that into law to ensure safety. What the Democrats have proposed, this is Barack Obama speaking, what the Democrats have proposed is to bring a little bit of regulation into the buying of guns and ammunition in places where there is none at the minute, because at the end of the day, most of these places get bought from gun shows where there is no checks, and it just happened to be that this particular shooter in Orlando happened to do the same thing, and that seems to be the common trend. And he's basically saying that is the bit that the NRA just put a big block against. So I don't think banning guns is necessarily the way forward, but regulation and trying to get through to that message to ordinary people that actually we're not trying to take your guns.
Yeah, and I think the reason that conversation hasn't happened in America is just their fetishization of the Constitution. And some of the most interesting commentary I've seen on the gun laws trying to explain why this kind of thing doesn't happen, it is a constitutional argument, because as soon as somebody makes the case that a gun owner can't have a gun, that means they are exempt from a article of the Bill of Rights, and as soon as you are exempting one set of citizens from the Bill of Rights, that can expand and escalate, and all of a sudden you are having officially non-citizen citizens. So they kind of see it as a root cause there, but you shouldn't have gun ownership in your constitution, and you should be able to reform your constitution, to be honest.
I mean, America has reformed its constitution in the past. I mean, prohibition coming in as an amendment and then being subsequently taken out. I think you have the issue that some judges see the constitution as being dead, as it was written. I know that Scalia is now passed, but
Scalia was always the person who came out and saying that Judge Scalia was the person who stood in the way of any reform.
I mean, in the way I can understand the basic argument of gun owners, that they're not using their weapons violently. It's the John Stuart Mill argument. Why should my personal liberty be taken away when I'm not harming anyone else? If a lone nutcase goes off and commits a mass atrocity, why should that affect my right as an individual to use firearms? I don't kill people with them. Arguably, the balance should fall on public safety.
Well, I mean, it's the Berlin argument, isn't it? Which is saying, okay, well, hang on a minute, it doesn't interrupt my liberty immediately until that person then kills my daughter. I mean, that's it. I mean, it never affects your liberty until you become the victim. And I think at that point you then go, okay, I will trade some of my liberty in order to.
And on that, I think it would be irresponsible of us to discuss this issue without discussing the other aspect of this, in that it was a hate crime against homosexuals in the USA, and
Owen Jones,
and restricting gun use may impinge upon your personal liberty, but their personal liberty is impinged upon every day of their lives. And if banning someone's gun use can protect their lives and give them more equal footing, then you have to have a very well reasoned argument against that.
Well, actually, the same argument could be said, because if white Americans were really having their country being taken over by all the Muslims coming over, because of course you don't have any native Muslims because that's not what religion does. But the point is that if that is genuinely the case, surely that you are protecting the native population, well, the native in inverted brackets, from being killed in Muslim terrorist plots.
I mean,
it's hypothetical.
But look at this though. Why is it in 2016 that we're having to talk in terms of this, of Muslims coming over here and affecting a culture, of gays being attacked, of politicians being assassinated? Like, how have we got to this stage in this country with the internet, with everything?
More knowledge than we could ever have at our fingertips.
Exactly, and we have Donald Trump and Boris Johnson about to be joint leaders of the free world.
I think I think the thing is, I mean, this is how I felt for the past couple of days in Britain. We've always laughed at America for having idiotic political leaders or having the mad political discourse, and now we're doing it. And I hate the fact that we're having assassinated leaders and we're having the...
It's the first time in my lifetime that I've felt that this country has proactively took a regressive step. Over the last 23 years of my life, from my perspective, it seems that we've got more tolerant, more welcoming, more open, at least culturally, maybe not institutionally. There are still major issues to come across, but this was a clear message of, no, we've had enough of that. We want to take control back.
I mean, it does come across as an attack on the establishment. I think while the status quo has been sort of moving forward somewhat progressively, I think that these hateful views have existed, and I think it has culminated in things like Donald Trump getting closer and closer to the highest seat of power in the world, like the public voting to leave Europe. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think on that note we'll call it an evening, because it's we're currently sat in the joint recording studio in London near King's Cross, and of course to get a decent sound quality we've had to turn all the fans off, and we're all quite warm. But no, thank you Jack Layton and Harry Raithatha for joining us. This has been the Priori podcast for July. Oh, by the way, one very quick thing before we leave. Somebody asked me why it's not pronounced the Priori.
Yeah, I flip between the two in my head when I'm...
Yeah, now this is because the Cantian version is Priori.
Okay.
And I've had a couple of sound level tests with people, and it's purely because when I was suggesting a name to people when I first came up with the magazine, people were saying Priori, and I just thought, instead of trying to correct them, I'm just going to go with it. And I just thought the Priori will be the one that sticks to me. So if anybody was worried, and particularly Julia at that party last night, you can be safe in knowledge that is why. But no, that has been the Priori podcast for July. We shall hope to see you next month. Thank you very much.
Right, that was the July Priori podcast with myself, Jack Layton, Harry Raithatha, Andrew Todd and Lewys Hall. It was recorded at the Joint in London. We'd just like to thank them for letting us use their facilities. And also, on a very quick side note, for finding my wallet that I dropped there, and luckily I don't have to go and buy a new driving licence or anything like that. But that was July's podcast. We'll see you again in August. Again, if you have any comments, let us know on the editorial at thepriori.co.uk. We have a load of new articles for July, including ones about the London Paella School that's opened up in Battersea, which is a bit different from what we normally do. We also have some travel writing for the first time. We're just trying to expand the horizons of the Priori, so let us know what you think by commenting on each article, and we shall see you again in August. Thank you.